Kulungu-Banda. A very good morning to you, of course. Martin, as we know, has worked at senior levels in both business, government and international development, specializing in leadership and organization development, and has previously served as special consultant to the president of Zambia. Well, Martin, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us here on Weekend Dawn. I mean, when we look at what Mandela's tenure as a leader encompassed, there are those who attribute that of him being a servant leader. There's also the reconciliation-oriented approach. When we look at what these terms mean, I mean, how did he manage to encompass this during his tenure, both as president and as a human being?
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to chat with you in commemorating one of not only Africa's icons, but global icons. And I have had the privilege of reflecting on his work and life and writing about him. The mystery still remains how a human being, ordinary as all of us are, takes every opportunity to morph himself and the environment around him to such a level that we can all drink from the well of his wisdom, his energy, his infectious happiness, even when the closest we can come to understanding where all this was born is a very strange place of struggle, both before and during the long years of imprisonment. How he took those moments, supposed to be excruciatingly painful, and uses them to build a character that mingles with the highs and the lows, the outcasts, the kings and queens of the world, remains simple, and his life has remained and will remain a big lesson for not only those in leadership, but for all humans. Forever, I must say, because the stories will live on. How he meets the boxer, Little Matlala, and together they enjoy a moment of mutual admiration. The next time you see him rebuking the United States president at the time, George Bush, for waging a war that Mandela thought was unnecessary. But he's also not shy to apologize when he makes a wrong judgment, as was the case in Zambia when he contributed to the support that Kaunda needed to remain in power. And yet when he realized this was the wrong move, he was quick at apologizing. A combination of all those qualities is worth admiring and learning from.
Now, Martin, I mean, on the back of you compiling your book, and as you mentioned, you know, baby Jake Matlala being one of them who, you know, fondly share their anecdotes and stories about their encounters with him. I mean, what was that process like in terms of sifting through who you were going to include and what themes and stories you were going to ultimately relay through this offering?
I must say, when I started coming across these stories, it was like the heavens, if you like. It was like the universe had just opened up and all these stories kept coming. Some of them close to the people I lived and worked with, others far afield. And television, like now, allowed also me to gather some of the stories. For instance, when Vuyo was interviewing the former head of state for South Africa, and Vuyo kept on announcing, today is a great day, because the most important speeches, the greatest speeches of Nelson Mandela will be launched in a CD. At that time, we were working through CDs. And I sat by my television set. We were living in Cape Town then. And when the former head of state walked in, and Vuyo couldn't hold himself and went on praising the greatest speeches of Nelson Mandela. And then he asked, Tata Mandela, how does it feel now that we are celebrating some of your greatest speeches. After a little pause, Mr. Mandela said, Vuyo, I feel very sad. Obviously, that was a shock in terms of response. And then Mr. Mandela continued, I feel sad because we are putting it across as if these were just my own brilliance. These speeches were a combination of different brands and forms of leadership within the African National Congress. And I was used as the vessel through which these were delivered. The celebration, therefore, is not simply mine. It is of all those minds, speechwriters, thinkers, leaders who wanted to communicate important messages to their people and the world. None of us could have imagined such a response because we tend to own everything when we are being praised.
Now, Martin, on the back of you obviously having the privilege of compiling all of these stories and anecdotes from various people, who've echoed their fondest stories related to Tata Mandela, what is your personal favorite and why?
It is the story of how a work colleague, and by then I was working in Cape Town for an oil company, and we had been building a school in Mr. Mandela's home place. And one of our colleagues was invited to go and debrief or brief the former head of state, the progress or lack of it, of the project. Our colleague went in excitement to have the breakfast meeting, came back, and he didn't speak to us. We were wondering why. After pressing him the following day, he shared with us that it was the shock of what the experience was. When they arrived, they found the former head of state waiting for them by the entrance to his home. My colleague went and sat at breakfast table. The former president appeared as if he was missing someone. He said, "You came, the two of you, where is your colleague?" And my colleague said, "No, it was just me alone. The other one was just the driver." Mr. Mandela stood up quietly, went and invited the driver to join them for breakfast. Our colleague said it was the sense of shame to see how the former head of state saw someone I only labeled as driver as one of us who needed to join us for breakfast. When we can see all human beings, regardless their current station in life, as equal and deserving everything that all of us deserve, that's a slightly higher notch of existing as a human being.
Yeah, he definitely acknowledged people, advocated for equality, was known for his kindness and fairness. I mean, also forgiveness and his ability to navigate change. Now, I want to look at some of those key virtues that you alluded to in the various anecdotes and your personal favorite as well, by looking at some of those key lessons and how it can be adapted for, a contemporary and future leadership approach, given the context, not only in South Africa, but the world over, as we navigate this new normal on the back of, a COVID-19 pandemic and obviously having to rebuild institutions at large.
I am fortunate, having reflected on those stories, that people across the world are interested in learning what those lessons are. And what fascinates me is the fact that it's not only those in public service or government institutions. It is also corporate leaders. I travel across the world to tell these stories to different leaders. Currently, I'm doing it with students in business school here in Oxford. It is because they truly communicate to all of us what is possible when we choose to show up fully for who we are and who life calls us to be courageous to confront issues when they are tough. And that's why, even when the entire world was disagreeing with Libya, because of the role Libya had played in supporting the struggle for the liberation of South Africa, he found a way of going to say thank you to the people of Libya. That is courage, when you stand for something and the capacity to speak truth to power. Truth to power, he was powerful himself, but you can imagine in the world when the United States, for example, is sitting on the wrong side of the argument you hold, what it takes to be able to say, I hold a different view and I disagree with you. And he managed to do that. But it is also the humility to just be like anyone. And that's why you remember after inauguration and moved into his official residence, he went to greet the neighbors, even when they didn't expect that he would do that. So it is issues of courage, issues of openness, transparency, and wanting to inspire people by not only your strengths, but also your moments of weakness. And that's why he was the first one, among the first, to come out and say, my close relation died from HIV and AIDS, and we now must do something about the situation. And you could see in his face, he was grieving, but he wanted to use his pain as a form of teaching to the rest of us. But as you know better than I do, he was also not short of celebrating, standing up and dancing when there was one little excuse for being grateful, for rejoicing. It's a combination of all these qualities that make him, that will continue to make him a standard bearer of what it means to be a leader in community.
All right, senior faculty at the Presenting Institute, visiting fellow at Oxford University's said business school research associate at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and also the bestseller Leading Like Madiba.